Good morning, everyone. This episode, we're going to be talking about negative gearing. Stay tuned. Coming up next. Oh, wrong button. Negative gearing, episode 299. Welcome, Mark. Wow. How are you?
Yeah, we're trumping it up. Who's trumping, winning or losing?
Oh, it's probably 50-50. It's literally a toy cost. It is. It's a toy cost. Trump has to win
this morning.
Trump has to win Pennsylvania and Arizona, but there are still a lot of votes to be counted. For example, Arizona, Biden's winning by 60,000 votes, but apparently there's still 600,000 votes to count. Pennsylvania, Trump was up 700,000 last night, and then he's only up 400,000 now. I saw on Twitter they're claiming victory, not sure if that's legit yet. But then there was some interesting stuff overnight where he was winning Michigan and Wisconsin, but then apparently all the votes are supposed to be at one place at one time, and then they count them. But 130,000 votes in both states just appeared saying, hey, we had these votes, and 100% of them, not one was for Trump. So there's a lot of stuff. It could be actually dragged out in courts for a long time. This happened 20 years ago with Florida and George Bush. It took 6 weeks to sort out. So we may know today, we may not know for a month. But
hey, you know what I looked at? That Mr. Biden won't be, by the time he finishes his presidency, if he wins, he'll be 81.
Yeah, he'll, I don't think he'll last 6 months. He won't do more than 6 months. There's huge corruption scandals under his name, which was neglected, and obviously he's cognitive.
It's all a sham. Anyway, let's talk about something that's
negative gearing.
we're really passionate about. And people, guys and girls, everyone has grown up hearing the word negative gearing. Occasionally people have heard the word positively gearing, and we wanted to give you a 5-minute tour around the words negative gearing, what those words actually mean, and how it actually works in property. We're obviously on the northern beaches of Sydney, and how it works with some actual properties, some real numbers to show you for dummies, negative gearing. It will make you a very, very nice lifestyle and retirement if you negatively gear well. Over to you, Burge.
Yes, I'm just bringing up just a quick what is negative gearing first. So what is negative gearing? Negative gearing is when you borrow money to invest into an asset, usually property, and the income you make from that investment, i.e. the rent is, I'm just reading from another screen, that's why my eyes are wandering, is less than your expenses, meaning that you're making a loss. Now, you probably think to yourself, well, that's bad. Like, why would you buy something if you're going to lose money? We're not talking about capital growth, which is the asset going up in value. We're just talking basically income versus outgoings is probably the simplest way to look at it. Now,
actually, that's a good point, guys and girls. Just you've got to remember this. There's 2 ways to make money on property. Exactly what you just said, Michael. We're going to put aside the growth of the property. So if the property goes from 500,000 to 600,000, that's called capital growth. We're not going to talk about capital growth today. We're going to talk about just dealing with the income per year and how that isolates over to negative gearing or sometimes positive gearing.
And while you talk about that, I'm just going to bring up this cool property analysis we did on our last end of month statement. So go through why people would buy something that's negative, Mark.
Okay, so basically when you own a property, in the course of a year, you will have to pay bills. You'll have to pay interest. You'll have to pay strata for maintaining the building, water for water to the building, council for rubbish collection, and council contributions to keep that facility or principality running. So what you do is look at all the negative costs in the property, and the obvious positive in the property is rent. I think it's the only positive that you're going to get out of it. So if, for example, your rent is $20,000 per year, and then your strata, water, council, and interest are $22,000 per year, then you're negative. Full stop. After the year's finished, you're down. You're down how much? You're down $2K. You had 20 coming in, and you had 22 going out. Interest, strata, water, council, 22 going out. You are down $2,000. Now, in Australia, and we're one of the only countries in the world that do this, we reward you for the loss. The actual government turns around and says, you lost $2,000 on property, you poor thing. We're going to help make that up. We're going to share that loss with you, and that's negatively geared. So then you can gear that $2,000 loss. Now, we're not giving you financial advice here, but we're just explaining 101 with what we see a lot of our landlords do and people getting into property do. Michael?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And where it can be very beneficial when you make renovations on the property, that comes off. So you may see someone, let's say their property is positive, because we want to get into that where the market is at the moment. Let's say your property is positive, but you need to do new carpet and paint. That will count counts virtually the same as a water bill. So then your outgoings go up and it could be turned negative. So you could have positive cash flow, improve your property, then it's a negative. The benefit of the negative part really comes to your tax portion. So that's why you need to speak to your accountant just to see how that would work. So when you sort of think, well, why would I want a negative property? Yes, the government reward you. Well, you're sort of rewarded, but how? It's really with your tax brackets. For example, let's say you're earning 100 grand a year, and you get taxed 40%. I know these are wrong, but principle. You earn 100 grand a year and you get taxed 40%. Let's say if your income was 98,000, you get taxed 30%. If your property loses 2 grand, it goes under. Like, that will help. So that's where people are happy to buy.
So just can we freeze that for a sec on that and just drill down on that example? So guys and girls, if you remember 2 minutes ago, I gave you the example. You've got 20 grand of rent coming into your property, and you got 22 grand of strata, water, council interest paying for that 1 year. Now, using your example, Michael, of someone that's earning $100,000, say they are paying 38 cents in a dollar tax. Okay. Now, that 2 grand that you've lost, the Australian government allows you to negatively gear. They allow you to gear that loss. And what that exactly means is 38 cents in a dollar you will get back of those $2,000. So you're potentially going to get $7,600 back of that 2,000 that you've lost in your tax return when you do your tax return of the year. So guess what, guys? You thought you lost 2,000. You only lost about 12 or 1,300, and because the government shared in that loss.
Yes. So that was quite common maybe 2 years ago. But Mark, interest rates are so cheap now. And we recommend nearly every property is positive. I'm just going to show another slide, which we did a breakdown on a lot of properties of their cash flow. So, for example, you've got this house in Narrabeen. I slide over, like, 1 point. Do you want to talk us through this, Mark? I know you're passionate with your numbers.
Can we zoom right up on that table? So we sent this out to all of our landlords this month. So all of our landlords received this, and we just wanted to show our landlords, look, here are 10 cracker properties, and here is the cash flow analysis if you borrow all of the money. That means don't put in a deposit because they already own a property. they can secure it up against that. So borrow 100%. So if they were buying a property for $1.9 million, if they borrowed $1.9 million, the rent for that exact property, the actual rent per week was $1,740. The mortgage repayments are 2.89. Now, if you do a 4-year fixed rate, I've heard of these 4-year fixed rates coming in at 1.99 yesterday, I heard. But let's use 2.89. You've got 1740 coming in. You got 1,055 going out to the bank to keep the property. That means you are positive 685 per week. That's 35,000 per year if you bought that exact house. Now, in that exact house, you're going to have a couple of other little bills like water and council,
Land tax.
and land tax. But in essence, Michael, when did you ever get to buy a property like that, a property of almost $2 million, and it pays you 38 grand a year in your pocket?
When
Where
your
do you
average,
get that?
you don't. And when your average salary is what, 58,000 a year, that is almost a second salary. That's almost having a partner of income. Now you may say that's just houses. I've got another one here, which is an apartment. So Clarence Avenue, I just sold this. Clarence Avenue, because you may think, well, I don't have 2 million to buy a house. This is typical. 860,000 is the purchase price. The rent, the mortgage, basically up $292 per week, 15 grand a year. Like that's crazy. Do you know how hard it is to get that extra from a salary, from your business income? Like now is a phenomenal opportunity to be positive. Now, why we talked about the negative gearing, mainly when properties are positive geared, I think the biggest messages out of this show is there's a lot of properties, like we manage nearly the most on the northern beaches, just shy of 1,500 properties or 1,500, and a lot of them are unrenovated. They've owned them for a long time. They've almost, like, it's your biggest asset, and it gets neglected if you look at how often people clean their cars and that. So now is a perfect time to go look at that apartment. You're up 15 grand a year, put $5,000 back into the property, get a higher rent, get a better tenant, rejig your property. I think now, out of any time owning a property, it's really invest back into it.
Yeah, it also means because what's happening now is the great news with Northern Beaches property. I think property in most of Sydney and in Australia, it's generally now. It used to be always negatively geared, but now and I know today is purely just about negative gearing, but when you are making more money per year than you are spending per year, that's when you're in positive territory. You have to pay tax on that profit that you make. You're in profit. But when you're in negative,
good point.
When you're in the negative, the government's going to share that loss with you. And with these current interest rates, it's pretty hard to be negative these days, but it's actually not a bad thing. And my outlook, what's your outlook, Michael, on interest rates the next couple of years?
I believe I believe they'll, at least for a year, it should stay good. I don't think our economy and gut people like having this low interest rates on what it represents for our general economy. But I think while we don't have immigration, while we don't have big education, while we don't have tourism externally coming in, I think it's going to stay like this. But once the other economies get bigger, rates will go back up. Just to be like, put it this way, if we're at this level and something happens again, we can't go lower. So you want a bit of a buffer. A healthy economy is my view. But I heard a really good stat. I was chatting with someone yesterday, and he said Australians spend more when we say no tourism, and this is why I bring this up, just a bit of confidence for our economy. Tourism, apparently we spend more overseas than people spend in Australia. So if we don't have people going overseas, then they could be spending it in Australia, which is great for our economy. People may buy holiday homes just for that local environment for our retail and commercial businesses out there, which was very interesting. I haven't verified it, but came from a pretty reliable guy. So I reckon that's pretty good. But I reckon rates will stay like this while the rest of the economy is slow, especially when they want to bump up construction and fast track DAs. Like, you need to have you need people buying. If you want to inject thousands of units across Australia in new homes, you need to have the buyers there. And if other sources are low, you got to make money cheaper to buy. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a stat that said average incomes went down 10% for people. Well, if that happened, then you need to make the money cheaper for people to still buy a home, if you still want them to buy homes and build. And I think they do, because we need that to keep going, is my view. What's yours?
I agree, man. I just think, it's, and again, there was similar. I saw some similar data come through. G'day, Amal. G'day, Luke. I saw some similar data come through on our habits and spending, and it's pretty exciting that we're pulling that money into our own economy. It's great. Hey, before we roll out, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for your support. I had a very nice person contact me yesterday from Queensland. Now, guys and girls, something that got me is real estate agents are watching this show. So how powerful is it that consumers like buyers, sellers, renters, and landlords can watch this show and learn? Even real estate agents are learning from this show. Gentleman from Queensland that I spoke with yesterday was saying he's been watching us for almost 12 months now, and his business he's built his business on the back of things that we're doing and advice that we're giving on occasions. And I was like, what it was just so it was so complimentary, and you don't feel like that you have that value, but we're offering so much value that even real estate agents are employing that value in their businesses, never mind buyers or sellers, renters.
I love that. Feel free to call me next time. Nah.
and I'll give Michael a call and give him a compliment.
That's the best.
But yeah.
And to answer,
you know what? It's cool.
Yeah, thank you. And to answer Anmal's question, what's better, negative and positive? Obviously, it's
killer question. It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah. You go first, and I'll say mine.
Yep, it's a double-edged sword because, Anmal, and everyone, you've really got to be careful about this. Property has always performed. I've always bagged out of Sydney properties because they have good rental return and bad capital growth. What does that mean? What that means is Sydney used to record a 4 or 5% rental return on the value of the property, and Sydney used to report a 10% capital growth. If you add 5% to 10%, that's a 15% you're making on your money. Now, what happened was, out of Sydney generally used to do 6 or 7%. Everyone was attracted to the rental return. Hey, I'm going to buy out of Sydney because it's got a better rental return. But what everyone missed was, out of Sydney was doing 5% capital growth. So you were getting 6% for your rental return, but you were only getting 5% for your capital growth. How much your property went up. Now that adds up to 11. Tell me, when you're investing $100,000, do you want 11% or do you want 15%? So to answer your question, Anmal, on should people chase the positive return or the negative return, they should chase a combination of income, be it positive or negative, income and capital growth, because capital growth is going to almost 2x your income. So it's okay to be positively returned or negative return, but please don't forget about your capital growth return.
Yeah, and I think you smashed it there with the combination because let's face it, obviously you would think you would prefer to have everything positive because if things are tough, let's say your income stops, your salary stops, then your property is paying for itself. You don't have that pressure. But then, yes, if that positive comes at the negative of capital growth, then you may need to look at it. And same with negative growth, just because it's negative and you've got to put a bit of money in to own that property. One, there's good tax benefits, but two, it may come with great capital growth. I feel you need and want a combination of both. I believe the most successful people in property have a big combination of both. And that can sometimes be in commercial property v residential. So I just think a good combination of both. If I was leaning towards you only could buy one property, then you want to play that long game with more whatever has more capital growth. So if it is negative cash flow, then take it because over 10, 20, 40, 50 years, that extra 5% in capital growth will really compound. But if you're going to have a multiple property portfolio, have a look at both because if you've got having one property negative $200 a week is okay if you can afford it. But if you have 6 properties all negative and they all have maintenance, it could really put a burden on it because let's face it, you can't cash out capital growth. It's there till you sell and you don't want to sell. Yes, you can redraw, like I get all that, but it's like shares. When it goes up, like you can't touch it, you can't use it, it can't be your payday next week where a positive cash flow can. So a combination of both, and if you do get a good positive and a good negative, it will counteract itself, and then you got 2 properties with capital growth. So I think really look at it holistically. But if I had to choose one property, I'd choose one that's negative with capital growth for long haul. But once you get into multiple properties, you really need to switch on.
That's a show.
That's a show. Thank you, everyone. Cheers. We'll be back tomorrow morning.
Mal.
See ya. Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye.